marketing. And one of my specialisms is native advertising. So about 3.5, 4 years ago, I was responsible for bringing the platform Yahoo Gemini to the market. Yahoo Gemini is now part of the OFAD platform suite. But native advertising is an area that the business is very, very focused on, and it's now actually become about 30% of our display revenues. So in this presentation today, I want to come back to some of the topics that Gemma and Coral were talking about in the IAB research. You know, maximizing the value of mobile, giving values to the impression, and then really connecting your inventory to as many demand sources as you possibly can. Now, I want to talk about these three topics through the lens of native, and how can native really try and allow us to achieve these objectives. So why native? This is a stat from Ender's Analysis, and they produced this in 2016, and they did a forecast of where they thought native advertising would grow over the next 5 years. And by 2020, they believe that it will have grown by 238%. So it is one of the most fastest growing portions of digital advertising. And within that, most of this growth is coming from mobile. So in many ways, native advertising and mobile advertising have almost become the same thing. And I think you'll notice more and more that many publishers are using native as the main and primary way that they're going to start monetizing native ads. And in 2018, the press is still talking about native a lot. In reality, native has actually existed for probably 50 years. In newspapers, in magazines, we were using advertorial, we were using content marketing. But as this has become digital, we're still talking about it, and it's still capturing all of the headlines. So whether it's delivering brand safety, whether it's delivering new experiences, whether it's giving more value to the impressions. But one thing that we've noticed, at Oath we do a lot of research. We survey our users, we survey our advertisers, we survey the publishers to really understand their views of the advertising industry. And one thing that's very concerning has come up is that between 2014 and 2018, there is a big growth in this question: is digital advertising becoming more intrusive? Now this causes us some concern. It's a little bit worrying for the whole industry, not just for Oath. One of the things that we know from our research is that users are telling us is that the quantity and the quality of ads has possibly declined. So now we know that 39% of users are beginning to use ad blockers. However, the good news is that 43% of them say they will stop using the ad blocker if the advertising experience was better. So the question we have to start asking ourselves is, how can we build back that trust? How can we use advertising in a way that is incremental to the experience, is good for the user, and actually gives them some value? So why are users using ad blockers? In Spain, some of the reasons are the same as they are across all of Europe. Ads can be inconvenient, there's possibly too much advertising, the ads are obscuring the content, and they want to eliminate some of the misleading advertising. So one of the things that we've been thinking about at Oath is, how can we just make that advertising experience better? We really want to make sure that the whole industry can maintain trust with the user and give them a better experience. Now, is native the medicine? Is this the thing that's going to make things better? Now, what we of course know is that native advertising is very seamlessly integrated into the way we build the content. It looks and feels like the content, that's the whole point. But is this the way that we can actually make that experience better? To do that, we really need to understand a little bit deeper the user and their behavior on the pages and some of their desires. So we've been conducting a research with a research institute called Sparkler, based out of London, and they've conducted this research across Europe with our users. They've done eye tracking studies, they've done questionnaires, they've done usability tests to really understand quite deeply how users interact with web pages and how they interact with native advertising. So I'd like to show you a few of the things that we've learned from this study. The first thing that was very, very obvious was that we did a comparison between MPUs and native advertising. And the most interesting thing that came out was that there was a very significant increase in the user's appreciation of the native ad versus the MPU. So in terms of appeal, sentiment, relevance, and trust, they felt there was a much better experience with the native ad versus the traditional MPU banner. And really what they were telling us is that they want a better experience. 79% of the users surveyed in this study said that they wanted the ad to blend with the page and be integrated into the experience. And what was very nice to hear is that 4 out of the 5 users said that they accept native advertising like a piece of content, which really tells me is that if we can make the advertising look and feel like the content and make it valuable to the user, give them something that they want, then they will happily not block those ads. So one of the other things we learned though, and this was very interesting, is that when you have native ads in your content, it actually increases the overall engagement of the page. So when we were surveying our users who are using the Yahoo web pages and the Yahoo apps, we actually noticed that the click rates on the articles also increased, not just the native ads. So we actually ended up improving the content experience and the advertising experience at the same time. So this was a really positive piece of information that came out of the research, that we are actually increasing the engagement with the editorial content and not just the advertising. And what we also learned was that the native ad was 25% longer in view. And when they did the visual tracking, so we actually had people wear headsets and we were following the movement of the eyes, we learned that on a mobile page, 85% of users were actually fixating on the native advertising. So we understood that it has a very high viewability rate, which is again a very positive thing to come out of this research. So did we solve the problem? That's the question we wanted to know. Has native really solved the problem? One of the things we keep considering is, just like display, just like video, we could fall into the same trap of having the same problems of ad blocking that we already do. So we want to ask ourselves, how can we make sure, now that we know that native is driving a positive experience, how can we make sure it stays positive and it doesn't turn into a negative experience going forward? So with this, we wanted to come back to these 3 areas. How do we maximize the value of mobile? How do we give value to impressions? And how do we connect inventory to the demand? And what I'd like to do is present you with some ideas and tips about the best way to use native advertising as a publisher from the perspective of Oath, where we've done it on our own publishing properties. So here are those tips. The first thing you really need to consider is the placement. So what you're looking at here is, again, an eye tracking study. We had several users wear a headset, and we asked them to navigate around the Yahoo front page, and to try and basically understand where the eye moves across the page. And so what you see here is the first 10 seconds, 10 to 20 seconds, and 20 to 30 seconds. I think the most interesting thing is here is that when you first arrive at the page, the eyes go to the headline. So this is the news. That's where you go first. The interesting thing is that as you go further, the middle of the page is the most important part of the page. And what we see is that the sides of the page become less and less important. So where we used to put advertising, so the MPU is here, the native ad is here, what we notice is that the sides of the page have much less visibility than the center of the page. So we have to really start considering what is the best way of integrating advertising into the center. With that, you have to start thinking about the anatomy of the native ad. The reality is that an advertiser wants to use all of it. When we build a native ad, we ask the advertiser to give us a title, a description, and of course their brand name. And then they can give us various visual attributes. So they can give us 2 different image sizes, and they can also give us a video. The reality is that they want to use all of it. So as publishers, we want to try and give them the opportunity to use all of it. So to take that a little bit further, descriptions. So within there, the advertiser can use the title of the ad and they can use a description. What we've realized is that where we use a description in the advertising and display that on the page, we actually generate an eCPM which is a lot higher than one without the description. Now, of course, you can't use a description in every single page, it's not possible. But where we do have the opportunity to use the full set of assets, all 5 assets, then it does increase the publisher's eCPM. The other thing to consider is recycling. Usually, I would say to you, recycling is a good thing. With native advertising, it's probably not a good idea. And what I mean by this is that it's very tempting to want to put native advertising into a traditional banner. So this is your standard the mobile banner. This is your standard MPU. You could very easily put a native ad into those units. You could put the image and the text into there. The reality is that this is the experience that the advertiser wants, and this is the one that is causing, driving the best experience for that user. So we're really thinking all the time about how can we place the ads in the right place, and how can we drive up that experience, even when we know that there is possibilities to insert it into a traditional unit. The other thing to think about is buttons. So one of the nice things about native advertising is that you can put a button on it. You can have learn more, find out more, get more, download now, get the coupon, click here. All of these call to actions are typically found in buttons that we put down in the corner. Interestingly, the users fixate there. When we did this tracking study, the eyes moved to that button. So of course, you can't do it everywhere. That's not always going to be appropriate. But if you do have the chance to insert that button, it can actually drive up that value to the publisher and drives up that experience for the advertiser as well, because it does create that good fixation. And then there are new formats as well. So the very standard native ad is your image and your text together. But if you really want to try and think about getting more content marketing, more brand advertising, we want to bring that experience even further. So the carousel ad is one of the newer formats that publishers are using. And what's nice about it is that it allows the advertiser to tell somewhat of a story. This is like a storyboard that you can swipe left and right. It makes the experience very tactile. And it really allows that advertiser to think about different products that they want to promote, or even tell an editorial type story. The other thing we're experimenting with at Oath is what we call an interscroller. So we're using the newsfeed with native ads in the normal way. What we're allowing the advertiser to do is use a much bigger canvas of images, so that it opens behind the newsfeed and creates that much richer experience for the advertiser to increase CPMs, to increase that brand dollars coming into the marketplace, and not just the performance money. So ultimately, what we've learned from this study is that native is really promising an opportunity to create a more active engagement, really deliver more time in view, and really show the user a really great experience. So I hope with this, this is information that you can use going forward. I hope this is something that's confirmed your suspicions about native advertising. And with that, I believe I can hand over to Ali to talk a little bit more about video. Thank you.
Hey everyone, good morning. I would start speaking in Spanish, but then